All right, everyone, we are back with episode 55, 55, woo, of Stub Luv Live. And tonight we have Tickets and Slabs, Fav, the famous Fav, coming onto the show. I see Fav's on. I don't see that he's requested to join. Let me get him on. Let me see if I can get him on. Fav in. See if we can get him on.
Hey, Howard.
There he is. What's going on, Fav? How are you?
Yeah, really well. How are you?
I'm doing great. You know, I appreciate you coming on. What is it, like midnight out there in England?
It is. It's midnight here. It's a kind of good. I'm just trying to work out what's going on with my settings because I can see myself, but I can't see you. Is that normal?
No, I can see you.
Amazing. Well, I can't see your expressions at all, which is perturbing me somewhat.
Well,
I
I'm
don't know
smiling.
if there's about that, but yeah, I'll live with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So, Fav, you've been on the show before, and I appreciate everyone watching. I see Tommy Bohm is on, The Bomb Tickets is on, Round Ball Rock is on. That's Derek Babson, Scott Fouracre, Rizzy 77. We got some people in the house, and it's an early episode for us here in the States and on the East Coast. But you know, it's so funny, Fab. I was talking to people today, and I was like, yeah, you know, I have Fab on the show, and, you know, we're going to be talking about concert tickets. And everyone that I've talked to about you, they only have, like, really nice things to say about it.
Yeah. I mean, I woke up this morning to someone applauding me for my packaging skills on boogers, which was a lovely thing to wake up to. But yeah, I don't know if I am just a nice person. I think you're just speaking to the wrong people.
No, everyone's telling me he's a nice guy, good to do business with, always very helpful, treats everyone with great respect. So I'm excited to have you on. And I guess we're going to talk about something that you're pretty passionate about, and that's concert
Yeah.
tickets and collecting concert tickets. And you know, look, I dabble a little bit in it. You know, I like to collect some concert tickets. I'm not as big as you. That's funny. Someone said to assume that was perfect. It's funny. But you know, I kind of went through a little bit of a list, and I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, I don't know that I've seen PSA slab all of these, but I think I have. First concert, last concert,
Yeah.
original band members, a certain
Mhm.
song's debut live, a certain album's debut live, special performances, concert moments, venue debut, awards debut like the Grammys or the VMAs,
Yep.
international debut like first time ever performing in London,
Yep.
headliner debut. I mean, so it's clearly pretty popular, clearly a lot of subsections. So talk to me, Fav. Educate
Yeah.
us.
God. So it's vast, isn't it? I mean, collecting in general is absolutely vast. But the sort of directions that you can go in with music I mean, the world is really your oyster. Um, I took a little trip down memory lane in sort of preparation for the kind of chat that we were going to have tonight. So I ended up getting this huge stack of these are my personal sort of like gig tickets that have kind of events that I've attended over the years, and it was really nice to sort of go through them and sort of firstly, you know, have a bit of a nostalgia trip
Yeah.
to sort of, you know, kind of just memories of some of these shows over the years. But I think the other thing that caught my eye was, first off, how bad the condition on some of the ones that I've kept has sort of been over the years. And I think when I started collecting kind of tickets in this sort of more, I guess, events that I hadn't necessarily attended sort of direction. For me, the first thing I kind of gravitated towards were the last concerts, because for me, it's much easier, I think, to view the opus of a band or an artist at the end of their career than it necessarily is at the beginning of their careers, and that's slightly different to the way that we usually view sports, for example. For sports, I think a lot of the time the debut is probably the be all and the end all in terms of value. But for me, for the last performances, there was something inherently attractive to collecting some of these, especially because so many musicians over the years have passed away, and in untimely circumstances, whether that's, someone like Kurt Cobain, or someone like Amy Winehouse, Jimi Hendrix, all of these legendary musicians who in some way have kind of almost been canonized by the fact that they passed away almost prematurely. So for me, that's where I really began. And the sort of last concerts were a nice way of just creating a small collection, especially of kind of, iconic musicians. They were relatively hard to find, I think, gig tickets. But I think there is something quite interesting in the way that we keep gig tickets. So, I mean, this goes back to the fact that, I mean, I've kept every single one of the gig tickets that I've attended personally. I haven't done that with sports, and it's probably because, when I go to see an artist or a band, I remember it might be the only time I ever see that band or artist live. And it's very different to, say, going to see, Arsenal Football Club. If I'm a season ticket holder, I'll see that team, 40, 50 times a season. With some of these bands or artists who might only have seen them once, I'm much more likely, I think, behaviourally, to hold on to that ticket. And I think that makes part of the collecting a bit easier in this space, because you can have venues that have very small capacities, but the tickets aren't necessarily impossible to find because there are people out there that hold on to them.
Yep.
So for me, it began with, I think, the last concert collecting, just because it was a really easy way to collect all of these different artists with a way of kind of creating kind of almost an overarching arc between different artists. So yeah.
I've heard, you, and I've also heard Mike Violi, who was on here. He's a big last concert ticket collector. I've heard Justin Sutterfield, who collects and sells. Justin collects, but he sells everything. But collects concert tickets. And I think the part of the desire is, there's some end game. There's some event that we can capture the artist in a ticket. That's incredibly meaningful. Not so easy when you're talking about first concerts, because who has tickets to some of these people's first concerts when they were starting their careers in garages, or starting their careers in venues that had 100 or 200 people show up?
I think you're absolutely right. I think pinpointing can be really difficult with some artists as well. So the one that I perhaps rally with and find some frustration that has been appropriated as a sort of debut is this Cavern Club from, I think, 1961 or 1962 past, that sort of pops up every now and again. And I don't know, I think it's interesting to think about that as being like the first show that the Beatles ever did, but I'm sure that they were rehearsing years beforehand. And it's interesting to think about that in the lens of, well, had the Beatles done anything of note at that point? Were they going to go on to be one of the greatest bands of all time? Yeah. You probably didn't know that. But in the same way, maybe that's similar to the way that we view sports stars as well. You don't know at the outset that Jackie Robinson is going to have the career that he has from the debut alone. Yeah. And so there's something unwritten about kind of what follows. But I do find it a lot harder to sort of tap into that debut mentality with with music. That said, I've seen some incredible pieces. I think, there was a guy, I think, on Boogers some time ago who shared, I think, U2's first ever concert that was paid for, which is just an astonishing ticket, really.
It really is, yeah.
To be able to capture that and definitively kind of have the first gig that they ever performed in, I think, Dublin, or something like Prince. I think when Prince started, to label himself as Prince, he played a gig, I think, at the Capri Theatre, and that's out there, that's known. So there are, I think, artists where you can pinpoint it and you can say, actually, that is a very collectible piece. For others, I think, it's really difficult because you don't know whether they were practicing in garages or whatever. So yeah, I think it's very artist dependent on whether a debut or a first performance is as attractive as it can be. I have one at PSA at the moment, so that's it's a bit of a technicality again. It's Peter Gabriel's first show after he left Genesis, but of course he left Genesis first. It's not Genesis' first show, and he only had the fame that he did as Peter Gabriel because of the work that he'd done in Genesis. So it's very easy again to pinpoint that as a specific gig that was his first gig, but it's not really his first gig, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I do. It's interesting, Fav. We have Darren Ravel, I saw, came in, and he says, first of all, great topic, and best growth in tickets now is concert tickets.
Mm-hmm.
And look, Darren's posted some amazing things that he's collected. He has a lot of Madison Square Garden debuts, Springsteen's debut at the Garden, Billy Joel, Madonna. I helped him get a Prince, but I know he's got a lot of concert tickets and some big events. You talked about that Cavern Club booklet, and Darren was, I think, one of the first ones to be smart enough to think about, hey, you could go get a booklet from the Cavern Club, and it would potentially have allowed you entrance into the first real concert of the Beatles, and just how legendary that is. So
yeah, just on that point, and I think what's really interesting is that I don't necessarily think that a lot of people would pinpoint certain gigs or certain ones of these gigs as being remarkably legendary. So what I find really fascinating about this topic, especially when we talk about it, is how much I think collectors kind of miss the obvious. So for me, some of the most remarkable gigs in history, I don't see people talking about in Boogers, and that sort of surprises me, because I wonder, is it because these tickets haven't been found? Is it because people are not looking for them? So there are two that I can kind of well, actually, there's loads, but the two that I'll probably kind of talk about to begin with, you look at any list of the top 50, top 100 greatest live performances of all time. Near the top of that list, if not at the top of most of those lists, is going to be James Brown live at the Apollo. Yep. And I've never seen a ticket for that. I've never seen anyone talk about a ticket to that. And I just find it fascinating that absolutely no one kind of talks about it. We're obsessed with the same sort of, names that we keep hearing that tend to be in the rock space. So it's Springsteen, it's AC/DC, it's the Beatles. Actually, there's a real richness with American music history. So things like James Brown, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, even bands like Talking Heads, who did iconic gigs that are listed in several lists of the most magnificent performances of all time. They've been, it's no hidden secret, because these performances have been recorded time and time over. They've been released as albums, and yet I don't think many people are collecting them. And I find that really fascinating, actually, because it's the same kind of rock heavy names that we keep coming back to. It's the Nirvanas, it's the AC/DCs, it's the Springsteens. But there's so much to the canon of music, I think, that is really untapped here. So yeah, if I can have a bit of a soapbox moment, that's probably it. There's a lot in this space that I think still remains kind of to be found and to be shared.
I'll agree with you, Fab. The gentleman that posted that U2 ticket that had, I think it's an admittance to the first or ticket to the first U2 paid concert in Dublin. I mean, I couldn't even believe that such a ticket existed, let alone someone would have one and have kept it. I mean, it just
Mm.
kind of really blew me away. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, you know, and I think Darren asked this good question, which is, you know, how do you do the research? Where do you find all of this? You know, and you know, I see Hall of Stubs. I know you know Hall of
Mm.
Stubs. We all
Yeah,
know
yeah,
Hall
yeah.
of Stubs. Great follow on Instagram. You know, he's always finding through his own just good, smart research, you know, the first time a group played, you know, this crazy famous song on stage, or the first
Yeah,
time they debuted an album and played songs off of that album. And you're like, whoa, man, you know, those are great tickets.
yeah.
And I gotta believe, Fav, he probably paid nothing for them. So it's just the
Uh,
rewards of his intelligence and the research that he's doing. I mean, I wish I had that foresight.
I, I would cite Hall of Stubs as being, you know, if you're not following him in this space, you absolutely have to follow him because the stuff he shares is just unbelievable in places. So, you know, the song debuts,
Yep.
but also the live debuts, and there are certain iconic performances that he has as well. So just to talk to one of those iconic performances, I think he's got the only one that I've seen in a slab of Dylan Goes Electric. So him playing at the Newport Folk Festival, which is, of course, if you've seen, is it A Complete Unknown, the film that documents his life. I mean, Dylan Going Electric is this huge kind of you know, performance that's almost, it's not just performer defining, it's arguably era defining as well. No, those song debuts, he is, you know, second to none with what he's able to find. I've got a couple here that I've kind of found over time, and I think the first thing that I would say with a lot of these is that you really need an artist who has a lot of diehard fans
Sure.
in the first instance. So, you know, here I've got one for the first time that the Stones played "Gimme Shelter." So, you know, just "Gimme Shelter," just one of the greatest songs of all time. But you know, the story behind this is that Mary Clayton, who did the backing vocals on "Gimme Shelter," they recorded it with her a couple of days before this performance at in Fort Collins in Colorado. And they absolutely wrecked the place. So, you know, but this is really well documented because there are Stones fans out there that literally exhaustively document basically every time they played a song for the first time. Now, I don't think that you could do that with every band going. But you know, with the greats, actually, there tends to be a very solid basis of research on which to kind of base that. And I would say that with the modern performers as well, that's increasingly better and better recorded. So I would say that one of the British bands that I kind of have the fondness for, Radiohead. Radiohead had a similar fan base in that they will just, I mean, you know, the moment they've played a song, it's already listed on a set list on the internet somewhere. And some bands just have that sort of a devout following where they are absolutely on it. They want to know what the set list is the moment it's been played, whether it's the first time in several years that you know, Radiohead might be playing something like Karma Police. They'll want to know that. Yeah, it tends to be very artist specific. I find that there are a couple of resources that I use that are quite useful for that. So setlist.fm tends to be a good first stab, but not infallible, is what I find.
Say it again slower, Pav.
So that is setlist.fm. It's quite good, I would say, but it's not something that I would hang my hat on to absolutely rely on. So I always try, if I find a lead on that site, to then go and kind of corroborate it elsewhere from somewhere that tends to be a bit more reputable. Yeah, so I would say that with live debuts as well, sometimes you just get lucky. This is another one. So this is a song that was actually slightly bigger in the US than it was in the UK. So this is "Enjoy the Silence" by Depeche Mode. So it was performed, just happened to be performed at a kind of TV gig for the first time, which was well attended in Germany. And obviously, being in Europe, that's a lot easier for me to find than, say, someone that's in the US. No, that show was televised, so there's just an actual record of "Enjoy the Silence" being one of the 3 or 4 songs that Depeche Mode played that night. And that being the first performance that they will have done after the song was written, but before Violator, the album that would come out afterwards, was released. So it's quite easy to pinpoint certain debuts like that. I think setlist.fm is an invaluable resource actually to that end.
The other thing I would say, Fav, I think relative to the comparison between concert tickets and sports tickets, this opens up a world of completely different collectors. I show my collection off to some people, and I've heard Darren say it, and I've heard Mike Violi say it. I can show them Michael Jordan debut tickets, and I can show them Wayne Gretzky debut tickets, and they're excited. But, you show them a Disney ticket, a ticket to the opening of Disneyland, and they're like, whoa, oh my God. Or you show them, this final Nirvana show ticket, the final concert. Yeah, there you go. There you go.
It's just, I mean, like the kind of world premieres, I mean, the eye appeal on a ticket like this is just so instant. Everyone knows that cover of In Utero. So it's just tapping in immediately because you've got that visual cue that you don't have on a lot of tickets. So, the number of people that might walk past, if I'm ever advertising it, at a show, the kind of generic Olympic tickets that I might have, it might well be something like a Jesse Owens debut. They won't know it's a Jesse Owens debut, but from this, that it's a ticket that would have granted you admittance to see Nirvana. And so there's that instant visual clue. Those tickets, and along with things like world premieres, actually, I think tend to be really, really good eye candy actually at shows. So yeah, it's really, really instantly gratifying to kind of see people kind of point out and say, oh wow, can I take a picture of that? I'm trying to look if I've got any other ones. I'm going
to show you. I'm going to show 2 real quick.
Yeah,
that kind of have gotten people's attention when I show mine off. So this is Zeppelin's last ticket from the last show with John Bonham.
Yeah.
And they have the Bonham experience now, and his son is performing, and it's just, for Zeppelin fans, this one just gets everyone. They're, oh my God, and it's Zeppelin, and holy smokes. And I recently, I showed this this collection of kind of concert tickets to a buddy, and it's not an expensive ticket. Everyone always shows it, but the Woodstock ticket, it always blows people away. Absolutely. It just does.
Yeah.
It's like it's a common ticket. I bought a PSA 10 because I'm thinking, well, why not? I mean, it's not that expensive, but when people see it, they feel like they're touching like a piece of gold. It's crazy.
Absolutely. I think, it's that instant kind of recognition of what it is. They instantly recognize, Woodstock as being the site of, Jimi Hendrix playing the Star Spangled Banner. It's that sort of, they just know it. And actually, I think with a lot of like sports tickets, you might not necessarily get that instantly unless you're a real avid fan. I think with music, you can have a generalist sort of appreciation of a lot of these things. I was just on the point of things that are visually kind of quite attractive. So here's a Grammy Awards ticket actually. Okay. And I think the award shows are quite an interesting sort of almost I guess complement to a lot of these pure concert tickets, because I mean, you've got the Grammy Awards here, and you've got the kind of less good Brit Awards ticket here, which is the British piss poor sort of version of the Grammys. But but again, those are quite interesting because you have a lot of live performances at those. That can be sometimes the first time that artists will collaborate on stage. So what's, I think, becoming much more common now is you have featuring spots on songs. So, you know, someone like Charlie XCX will do a song with Billie Eilish, and they'll only perform it once because they'll happen to be in the same city. And so there's something really fun about trying to look for those tickets as well. But award shows are interesting in that regard because you have a lot of those collaborative performances taking place. So at the 59th Grammys, actually, what's labelled on the flip here is that it was Daft Punk's final performance. So Daft Punk, French kind of electronic group, happened to perform with The Weeknd. And it just happened to be their last performance, actually. So this kind of, you know, plays into both the award show thing, but also the last performance thing. And I think that's just really cool. You know, I don't know if anyone else has graded this ticket, but I, you know, grew up with kind of in that sort of like 90s, 2000s transitional phase, and I would say that, you know, a band like Daft Punk are probably one of the most influential bands of the era that I grew up in, and certainly, you know, colour a lot of what I listen to. So yeah, I think stuff like that taps into sort of like a personal interest is also just really cool.
So Fav, I'm older than you, but like the big moment that we all think about is the Madonna, Britney Spears, kind of Christina Aguilera kiss. And I forgot to bring that pass. I have a pass to that moment, but it's kind of what you're talking about. It really wasn't a concert. It was, but it was an awards, and people just remember it. You know, it's iconic, and it stands out. And when I show that to people, they go crazy. You know, they go wild. And it's funny. I kind of bow down a little bit to you, especially when it comes to concerts and music. And, you know, I have the VMA ticket or pass for
I need that one. I know the exact one that you're going to talk about, the Taylor Swift, Kanye West one. Yeah, that still remains on my list of things that I really want. Interestingly, I was walking around the town that I live in earlier today, thinking, oh, you know, what are the tickets that I'm going to bring on this show? And actually, I flashed it up earlier. This ticket here. It's the Brit Awards in 1997. I reckon you could ask anyone between the ages of about 25 and 45 in the UK and ask them, what was Jerry Halliwell wearing on that night? And they would all be able to tell you that she was wearing the Union Jack dress. It's just this iconic performance of kind of the Spice Girls at the height of their fame. But again, it's probably a bit like that kind of Madonna, Christina Aguilera, the Britney Spears kiss. You know, it would be hard for me to pinpoint, not being kind of American per se, but like at the same time, this is almost my version of that. It's you know, just something that I think everyone in the UK of a certain age will remember. So yeah, there's that.
It's really cool. So where do you see, Fav, the future of? It's funny. I'm talking to you for 28 minutes, and it's like I talked to you for 2 minutes, and it's, you know, all night. But, you know, where do you kind of see the future of this? I know, you know, Darren wrote up here, you know, PSA slabs some of these moments, and I guess if you can prove it, you know, they'll put it on a flip. Some of the things they won't. But, you know, where do you see the future? Is the future going to be in last concerts, and that's going to be what sticks? Is it going to be Square Garden debuts, or, you know, the debut at Wembley or something like that? Where do you get going?
So I actually think, you know, in the sports space, in the sports world, we have had this eons long debate about debuts versus moments, etc., etc. And, you know, I think everyone begins as a debut collector, or for me, you know, a last show collector. They're pretty similar. They're easy milestones to collect. Now, as I've started to think about this more and more, actually, what I think about more and what I want more of are the tickets where something really incredible happened. And I think there are collectors that are already doing this. So, you know, the collectors that I think of, Hall of Stubs, you know, he's already getting those iconic performances like Dylan Goes Electric, like Nirvana at Reading. You know, when we hear Nirvana, we're instantly, the two performances I think the hobby has a habit of thinking about are the last gig and Unplugged. And they're both iconic in their own rights, but actually if you're thinking about a singular Nirvana performance that is kind of almost era defining, it's going to be Reading Festival. I think there are other collectors that are already doing this really well as well. So Ben, Only Fools and Horsemen, has some really cool stuff. So he's got kind of some of the stuff from Eminem. He's got some of the really early iconic important Nirvana stuff. My Sports Compendium. So James is also doing a load of stuff in this space. So he's younger than me, and you can tell from our music taste that he's much more into kind of the emo stuff. But the stuff that matters to him, it's what hits that chord from a personal interest perspective. So it tends to be stuff like My Chemical Romance, you know, and that's not really a band that I follow. Yeah. But I think that what we are seeing is more of this moment chasing, actually, away from kind of the last gigs, away from the debuts, and they'll always be valuable, and they'll always, you know, be an absolutely necessary part of collecting. What I see myself, what are the things that I really want? I want stuff like, you know, Marvin Gaye playing What's Going On, you know, at the JFK Centre for Performing Arts, because I think it's one of the most iconic albums of all time. He was mourning the loss of Tammy Terrell for 4 years. He didn't play a single live show. And then in 1972, he played a live show for the first time. That's a ticket I want. And why do I want it? Because it's one of the most iconic albums of all time.
Sure.
And, you know, I love Marvin Gaye, but I think there are so many of these sorts of things within music. And that's the direction that I'm personally going in. It's not to say that I won't still pick up the kind of odd last concert or odd debut gig when I see it, but for me it's much more around those kind of moment type things. So yeah, that's what I see happening, and I think the longer that you're kind of in any space, I think that tends to happen with time. So yeah,
I think that's great advice. I mean, I wonder how prevalent those tickets really are. I mean, are they out there? Are they somewhere?
I mean, it's a really good point. You know, I feel like with concerts, it goes back to what I said at the start of the show. You're so much more likely, I think, to hold on to a concert ticket. But you're also, like, I mean, I look at my own collection of, God, like 100 tickets. I was going through them earlier, and I wouldn't dream of like letting go of them. So I find the personal attachment that I have to concert tickets much stronger than I do to some of my personal sports events that I've attended. Now, if you're trying to tap into the psyche of someone that wants those tickets, you have to work incredibly hard to get them, to prize them out of the hands of those people that attended those gigs. I think that they might be out there. I certainly think that there's probably like a James Brown live at the Apollo. I think there's another James Brown gig, so him live at the Boston Garden the night after, I think, was it Martin Luther King was assassinated? Yep. So there's a really famous gig that kind of, I think James Brown was asked to perform at the Boston Garden to quell kind of the emotion that was in the city that night. There must be these tickets must exist, or maybe they don't. I might be looking for a needle in a haystack, but you know, there are a lot of there are a lot of things that I really want, and they tend to be in that sort of. I think there are other things that definitely don't exist. So, for example, I've got on my list of gigs that I was going to mention on this chat, you know, Stevie Wonder. I'm a huge Stevie Wonder fan, but one of the most iconic memories that I have of, you know, discovering Stevie Wonder and seeing him perform was him performing on Sesame Street, which I suspect probably isn't something that there's a ticket for. No. So, you know, I'd love to see it if it exists, and maybe Hall of Stubs will pull a rabbit out of the hat and we'll see it there. But you know, as with a lot of things in ticket collecting, I think you have to sort of enjoy it vicariously as well, and just enjoy it when other people find things, because it's impossible to own everything. You just have to kind of revel in the joy that other people have when they're able to find something and share it. So I hope someone finds it. I hope it's me. If it's not me, then I hope a fellow collector is able to find some of these gigs as well. So yeah.
So I guess I kind of end where I start, Fav. Here's those words, and here you are saying you'd love to find it, but if someone else in the ticket community found it, you'd be so happy for them. And it just
Yeah,
goes
yeah,
back to what we all
absolutely.
say about Fav. He's always, a good guy, a good resource. If you have any questions, reach out to Tickets and Slabs. He seems like he's always on IG. Whenever I send him a message, he's like right back with a response. It's always meaningful. He'll take time to help you with research, and just an overall good guy. You're really good for the ticket collecting community. Everyone really has nice things to say about you, Fab. So I'm going to be the guy. I hope you find it. I hope you find
Thank you.
one of these.
I hope I do, but I know how much of a needle in a haystack some of these things are, and I will revel in the enjoyment of any collector finding them. So let's see where we are in a year or two's time, see if any of these gems have been unearthed. Yeah.
So what I'd like to do, Fab, is this was such like a brief overview of just generalized concert ticket collecting. I hope you'll come back on and maybe we can do a deep dive into some more of this, because I think it deserves another show or two.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much that you can talk about with music. Listening to your show with Tom and is it Ticket History? Is Chase?
Yeah.
And I thought what was really interesting about two of the shows that you did, you did one on the iconic photos kind of within sports. You could easily do that with music. You've also got the kind of overlap with things like social justice and the socioeconomics. So half the artists that I've talked about today, so Marvin Gaye, what's going on is about social uprising. It's about social justice. There's so much in that space in general that I believe remains kind of untapped, and would complement, I think, a lot of collections that are sport focused in that area anyway. So yeah, there's loads that we could do in the future. Let's do it again.
We'll bring Ben on. We'll bring James on. We'll have a good old party, and we'll talk a little bit more. I think this was a good overview. I always like talking tickets with you, Fav. So I really appreciate you staying up for us Americans.
It's a pleasure. Not a problem at all.
Episode 55 with Tickets and Slabs. We're done. Thank you very much, Fav. Appreciate it.
Guys,
have a good night.
Thanks. You too.
Bye-bye.